started here. Welcome to the Shift Health and Nature webinar series. This is chapter 1, the Health and Nature Movement. And our webinar today is the role of parks and public lands in supporting public health. And we have with us Linda Wang to present. Just to give you an introduction about me, I am the principal scientist for Middle Path Eco Solutions, a consulting firm that helps businesses and organizations align better to the needs of their community. I'm also the a research scholar and community director for the Ronan Institute for Independent Scholarship, an institute that provides a home for researchers and scholars working outside of typical mortar and brick institutes like universities and federal research labs. I'm a social ecologist, so I've worked in such areas like conservation development, traditional medicine and public health, forest management, livelihood strategies, community resilience, social ecological management. And so I mention all of these because they're very relevant to what Shift does and what it aims to do. So here I'm pleased to take on the role of Shift's Health and Nature webinar series as a coordinator and also a co-developer, working closely with Christian Beckwith, who's the executive director of Shift, and I'm the host today for the webinar. And so just to give you a little bit of background about Shift, if this is the first time that you've been interacting with Shift, it's a 501c3 nonprofit organization based in Jackson, Wyoming. Its mission is to help advance and promote the health benefits of time outside. And historically, Shift has had two main programs, the Shift Summit, which is its annual summit held each fall in Jackson Hole, that explores issues at the intersection of outdoor recreation, conservation, and public health. It also has the Emerging Leaders Program, which trains early career leaders in the health and nature space. And after last year's Shift Summit, Shift, the organization, began focusing on two other objectives that align with its mission. The first one is to develop the evidence base for the health benefits of time outside. And the second is to develop a national narrative around the health benefits of time outside with partners from the outdoor rec, conservation, land management, public health, and education. And this webinar series, we developed this with the idea in mind that it would help to support both of these objectives. So the webinar series itself, the concept behind it is to bring together innovators, opinion leaders, and researchers at the forefront of the health and nature movement to help advance our understanding of the public health benefits of time spent outside. And so overall, what we aim to do is to stimulate cross-sectoral learning as a first step towards transdisciplinary advancement of the field. And we'd also like to promote broader mainstream adoption of the health benefits of contact with the natural world. So we're currently in the first chapter, and the intent behind this chapter is to provide a high-level overview of the opportunities and challenges facing the health, nature, and nature movement. We had, on March 10th, we had Dr. Michael Sook, who presented, and we also had a special episode on nature and the COVID-19 pandemic. That was last week, and so today we have Linda Wang. And the subsequent chapters, chapter 2, which will begin with our next webinar, it will be on public health, chapter 3 on conservation, chapter 4 on land management, and chapter 5 on outdoor recreation. And the intent behind these chapters is to provide a deeper exploration of the topic from the perspective of our different stakeholder communities. So I'd like to introduce Linda Wang. She is currently the managing director for the strategy and innovation department of the Trust for Public Land. She helps to develop long-term strategy for TPL by providing high-level leadership and setting performance metrics for the department. In her previous role at the Trust for Public Land, she worked directly with each U.S. state office to develop their 5-year strategic plans and to align them with the Trust for Public TPL's overall strategic vision. Prior to being at TPL, Linda was a partner at Ecometric Solutions Group, a startup that developed customized decision support tools to quantify ecosystem services for clients. She was also at the Business for Social Responsibility, where she built and led advisory services program offerings on corporate water strategy and ecosystem services strategies for Fortune 500 companies. Linda has a BA in environmental economics, a master's of philosophy and developmental studies and social transformation, and she also has an MBA. Following her presentation, we're going to have about a 20-minute Q&A session. And you can post your questions in the Q&A. It's up towards the bottom of your screen. And also be aware that this webinar is being recorded. So with that, I'd like to invite Linda Wang to present.
All right. Well, hi, everybody. And thank you for making time for this, as we are all getting used to our new work from home environments, and hopefully you all are set up well in your space. I'm reporting live from my living room in Oakland, California. The Trust for Public Land offices all decided to close about 2 weeks ago, so we're actually in our second week. And I just want to start this off. I do have a whole set of slides that I'll get into, but I think everybody is thinking a lot about what's happening right now. The driving goal of our mission at the Trust for Public Land is to create healthy, livable communities. And so the health of our partners, our staff, and the communities that we serve is our top priority. And so with that in mind, the staff across our 25 or so offices are all telecommuting. We are following social distancing guidance. As you guys all know, the situation that we're all in is changing hourly, it feels like. And so we continue to follow the recommendations by the Center for Disease Control and Prevention, and we just will continue to assess our operations as we all learn more. We know that this is a really stressful and difficult time for people right now in the country, as we are all grappling with the impacts of this virus. Having these public natural spaces where people can have limited social interactions while also getting fresh air and exercise for physical and mental health has never been more important. And while social isolation is what we need now to flatten this curve, public health experts are also recognizing that it will lead to a host of negative effects that can also affect our mental and physical health. We all know that the power of the outdoors is really critical for our health and well-being. While some parks and trails and outdoor spaces are actually closing due to this pandemic, some are still open. So we encourage those people who are venturing outside to be mindful as you get from point A to point B, and to limit your social interactions, to follow the recommendations by your public health authorities. And just to remember that while many feel fortunate that they have the ability to get out into the nature, we really have to remember that some communities don't have access at all to good quality outdoor spaces, much less places to go outside where that, rejuvenation is possible. So TPL believes now more than ever that our country's parks, trails, and outdoor spaces are an integral part of our recovery. They should be available to everyone, not just folks who can afford to live in places with beautiful outdoor spaces. Over 100 million people today in this country do not have access to a park within a 10-minute walk of where they live. And so our communities, our volunteers, our network of partners, and our really amazing staff just continue to work through this hard time. We are continuing to build parks and transform schoolyards and protect land so that we can ensure that everyone has access to good public spaces and really be part of the recovery. All right, so thank you, Arika, for being so on top of my slides. Let's see, let me switch gears here, folks. So our work is definitely very complex, but our objective is very simple. It is about land for people. I think I have a little bit of a delay here. We believe that everyone deserves a great park. So as you all know, research is showing, more and more research is coming out that parks and public lands aren't just nice to have, they're actually critical requirements for thriving communities. That's why we work really hard every day to ensure everyone has access to the outdoors, from neighborhood parks to national parks. We know that parks transform communities. Neighborhoods with great playgrounds, trails, and open spaces are more vibrant, they're more healthy, they're more resilient. Spending time in the outdoors allows us to disconnect from our always-on culture and reconnect with nature and reconnect with each other. Our mission is to create parks and protect land for people, ensuring healthy, livable communities for generations to come. And for the last almost 50 years now, we've created more than 5,000 parks and green spaces. We have protected more than 3 million acres from private development. We've generated close to $80 billion in public funding for parks, trails, and open spaces, and we have put a park within a 10-minute walk of home for more than 9 million people around the country. Arika, you can actually hop to the next slide, or maybe even to, sorry, I'm just sort of like, you know, going through pretty quickly, and the next one as well. Just a quick snapshot of all of the numbers, which hopefully most people are. I'm completely distracted. Is there a site to reference the percent? There is a resource called ParkServe. It's a database that we maintain of 14,000 parks. Sorry, it's the parks in 14,000 towns and cities across the United States. And it covers about 85% of the US population. And so what we do is, because we have the ParkServe database, we can look at where all of the park need areas are for those 14,000 cities and towns. So the reference is, if you go to tpl.org /park-score, you can get to a ParkServe from there. So you just basically type in any city and you can see the park need areas. You can go to the next slide. Okay, oh, and so there's your statistic here. So what we do know is it's actually about a third of us, including 28 million kids, who lack 10-minute walk access to parks. Next slide. For those of you who have been following this series, the first one that happened recently was Dr. Michael Suk, and he gave a great presentation that laid out some of the science that shows us how beneficial nature really is. He talked about, he had actually a lot of really great resources that talked about the physical and mental health benefits of nature. Next, please. Unfortunately, Americans' participation in outdoor recreation is actually trending downward. So every year, the Outdoor Foundation, I think for the last 3 or 4 years, has released its outdoor participation report. Earlier this year in January, they released the 2019 Outdoor Participation Report, and it found that about half of the US population participated in outdoor recreation at least once in 2018. But the report highlights the pretty alarming trend. Just under half of the US population does not participate in outdoor recreation at all. Next slide. I really encourage you guys, if you haven't seen this report, to download it from the Outdoor Industry Association website. It's just got a lot of great statistics. They break down participation by demographics, by sport. So for those of you who are trying to understand just better some of the trends, it's a really, really great resource. Next slide. A study that was published actually back in 2019, it looked at data from the National Health and Nutrition Examination Survey from about 51,000 children, adolescents, and adults. And it found that sedentary behavior remained high or even increased from 2001 to 2016. So for all of us at the Trust for Public Land, we're asking, what can we do to change this behavior? What can we learn about the non-use of parks and open spaces? And what prevents people from visiting parks that are within a 10-minute walk of where they live? So a lot of the surveys that we've done for some of the parks and the schoolyards that we're working on, the surveys have shown us that distance traveled is an important factor, the transportation options, the cost of getting there, the cost of using the space, not feeling welcome when they get to the space, signage being in languages that they can't understand. And what was really interesting for us as well was people not sure what to do in parks when they get there. Those are some of the top reasons that keep people from using their neighborhood parks. Next slide, please. There is actually an abundance of research out there on the benefits of parks. But what's really interesting is that these studies often ignore some of those really distinctive characteristics surrounding parks, including the available amenities and the facilities in the park, the spatial distribution of parks and the socioeconomic context around them in those neighborhoods. And unfortunately, this often can drive a belief that all parks are more or less the same and that more parks is always better. And worse, they often can perpetuate this perception that one park fits all. And it really, it leads to sort of almost ignoring or disregarding some of the cultural and racial differences in park perceptions, park preferences, and ultimately in behavior and use. So when we think about usage patterns and which parks are being used and why, we are also now trying to capture a lot more information from people who are not using parks so we can start to address some of those barriers. So this usage and non-usage data adds a really important dimension to our understanding of what equitable access is. And it helps us inform the design and, in a way, the customization of parks for the preferences for the communities who have historically not been asked what they're looking for in their parks. Next slide. So one of the ways that we're doing this right now is through the use of anonymized cell phone data. And I know that this can be, when I started learning more about this data, it's definitely creepy, but it's actually, well, I'll just be honest, it's a creepy use of information. It's anonymized cell phone data, but we're trying to use this information so that we can really create better parks for people and ultimately drive usage of those parks. We're working on a project right now with New York State Parks to help them understand usage for just a portion of their parks, the parks in their entire system. This is a snapshot of Allegheny State Park, which is the largest state park in New York State, and it's open year-round. And this shows which amenities visitors to Allegheny are using and when they're using them. And so this helps them plan better in terms of understanding. I mean, I think all of us understand now or have experience around limited operations and maintenance budgets. And so for a lot of park systems, this information is really useful for really putting your dollars where people are actually using different amenities in your system. Next slide, please. We also know that for some communities, transportation to the outdoors can be a barrier. A few years ago, we added land to the San Gabriel Mountains, the national monument out there in the Angeles National Forest in LA County. The San Gabriel Mountains, for those of you who are in that LA area, you know what a treasure that is. The San Gabriels contain about 70% of the open space in LA County. So it's a really important resource for more than 17 million people. We were part of a pilot shuttle project to provide free transportation to one of the recreation areas that's a really popular and highly congested destination. The pilot ran for about 7 months in 2018. And at the end of that pilot trial, the county did say that the ridership was sufficient to run a new line. And for us, one of the significant outcomes of that whole experience was that for the transit planning process, recreation is one of the destinations that transit planners consider alongside with, job locations and school locations. Another significant learning for us was that planning for the actual route is actually really important. The route that you see here in this line was integrated with an existing line that went through a historically neglected neighborhood located between the rail station and the trailhead. And so it took a little bit longer to reach the destination, but it did advance our goal of increasing access to the outdoors for historically underserved neighborhoods. So I think we will be trying to look for those partnerships around, trying to increase public transportation to some of these public lands that are pretty close that people just have no other way of getting to. So I have different recommendations and learnings from that. If people are curious, we can get to them in the Q&A. Next slide, and you can show this one and the next slide. Most of you are probably involved with or work with organizations that are focused on getting people outdoors. And I'm so pleased to see how many of these organizations exist and how successful they continue to be. On these two slides, they're just two examples. I mean, there are so many now, which is just fantastic. And I think, you know, many of you on the call probably have also experiences that you can share. So these are just two examples of recreation programs that are really well structured. They are intentionally designed to help adolescents build a sense of autonomy, positive social relationships, learn conflict resolution, and, you know, build both academic success and just developing their own identities. And as I said, I know so many of you on this line can probably be great resources for how to get started and just for sharing what works. Okay, you can actually hop to the next slide. I think that's this Big City Mountaineers is just one example, and then this is something that the state of California Parks and Rec agency produces. It's called Fan Camp, and it's also a great program. All right, next slide. And I just threw this in here because I love this slide. We spent a lot of time getting all of our programming, any packet of information that we put out, we spent a lot of effort translating those into different languages. This is just a great reminder that small things like bilingual signage, you know, wayfinding signs can really go a long way toward making people feel welcome. All right, next slide. All right, so fortunately, there's a lot that many of you on this line, a lot of the parks and open space advocates out there can do to plan collaboratively with people to increase their use. I'd had a slide with just like a long list of do this, do this, do that. And I can speak to some of that right now. I think we can definitely open it up for discussion because I think, again, I know that many of you on this line have great experience doing this. Just a couple of things that I'll call out is really start with your own colleagues within your own organization and really develop policies and programs that align with your system's mission and your vision. So think through the role of your system, your park system in urban environments, get buy-in from your leadership for pursuing diversity initiatives, and try to really push that vision out throughout your organization with your colleagues. And I know many of you have already begun to shift your organizational culture to really embrace a more shared decision-making process. So this is really about inviting the public and other stakeholder groups in during the early stages of program planning, while you're doing your outreach, while you're thinking about program implementation, and bring in transportation agencies, landowners, friends of groups, other advocacy groups, tribal representation, faith-based organizations, any community organizations that have a big ethnic minority membership, even local businesses and potential new business owners are great to kind of bring them in as you're thinking about programming and what you could offer. And try to leverage those resources also to help you think about funding programming. I think many of you already collaborate with your public park agencies, your federal, regional, municipal agencies, land conservancies, other land management and conservation organizations, and collectively create those consistent messages on the benefits of parks and open space. And this is where partnering with the public health agencies and other private healthcare professionals can really help drive use of the parks. Think about how they can use, I think many of you are already thinking about how these public health professionals can use the parks to promote physical activity, other health benefits. And I think we're always thinking about how to diversify funding sources. So think through those, look for public-private partnerships coming from individuals, corporations, private community foundations, and really ultimately help policymakers, different legislatures understand the value of parks and the challenges that parks can help address. Ultimately, a lot of the work that we do is about trying to enhance community connections, so among people, and connections to the outdoors as well. And lastly, I think a lot of you, well, I guess two last points around designing multi-use parks and just to provide a wide range of programming. So we've started to, whenever we stand up a park, we always try to help put together a Friends of group or some other stewardship group. And some of the first things that we try to lay out is a calendar of events, sort of, rough structure for programming. So hosting cultural events in the parks, arts, music, theater, different festivals, trying to create attractions and destinations throughout the park. And probably one of the biggest drivers that we've seen for use is just developing a really comprehensive marketing plan to reach those diverse audiences. Just putting signs up around town saying this is happening in your park, here are things that you can do in the park. Again, one of the biggest things, one of the eye openers that we've learned is that many people just don't know what they're supposed to do when they get to a park. And so putting signs out there around what's happening in your park, different things that people can be doing, different family events, again, cultural events, working with those community-based organizations to reach out to the folks that they're in regular contact with is a really great way to increase usage. Okay, last slide, Erika. So as I said, TPL is in the process right now of engaging communities to develop parks. So when we put a park in place, we go through a pretty hands-on participatory design process. And we do the same thing with schoolyards. And so this is especially tough because schools are closed and people are not many people are sheltered in place or actually just practicing good social distancing, as we all are. And so we are actually right now very actively looking at how we take engagement online. So we're looking for different ways to engage neighbors that keeps everybody safe while also keeping our participatory design processes moving forward. And so to that end, we're looking into online engagement platforms. We want to continue, for us, we're focusing on two things, really, continuing the quality of our engagements and increasing the quantity of engagements. So we want to continue to provide information about the project, provide updates continually. We're trying to get as much, probably more feedback than we might typically do during a more hands-on engagement process. And just continue to build excitement and support for the project while we are all in this pandemic times. So as we're looking at these online engagement platforms, we have a couple of things that we're looking for specifically. So one, a project-specific URL, which I know sort of seems like a small thing, but it's really confusing for people if they're having to go to a URL that is very unrecognizable to them because they're thinking about the name of the park or the neighborhood that they've been working in. We're also looking for ways to gamify questions or surveys so that you're just not running through kind of the SurveyMonkey list of questions online. We're looking for chat capabilities as well, so real-time chat with people when they're logged in. Really important to us because we traffic in a lot of spatial data, is making sure that we have map-based feedback capabilities so that we can aggregate information spatially and geotag that feedback that we get. And then equally important is real-time reports and visualizations. So we want to be able to get feedback from people, have it mapped and geotagged, and then show people that feedback in real time so that anytime they log into this platform, they can see how they've responded to questions and then how other people have responded in the aggregate. So it's a nice way to provide continual feedback. And then for those communities that don't have easy online access, We're trying to put everything down on paper. So all of our real-time reports and visualizations need to be easily downloaded into a paper report that we then make available for pickup for folks. And so right now, we're evaluating, I think, 3 to 5 different online platforms to figure out what we can use as an organization as we try to continue our park planning processes. So I think as we shift to the Q&A portion of this, I would love to hear what you guys are looking at as well, and if any of you have found some online engagement platforms that you like, and just why you like them and how you think you might use them. So that's actually my last slide.
Great, thank you so much, Linda. That was a great presentation. I love hearing about how TPL is really engaging with the community. I think that's not an easy thing to do. So just hearing about the best practices and the ways that you guys are implementing those and how you're drawing people in and listening to them and bringing them into really early on in the process. And also your focus on addressing the socioeconomic diversity, cultural diversity, and those inequities and how you can overcome those. That's wonderful to hear that the great work that TPL is doing. We do have some questions already rolling in. I really like the first question. They ask,
yeah.
It's anonymous, but they ask, can you address how TPL monitors whether or not their green infrastructure and parks that they're creating are increasing or compounding place space inequities in the form of legacy, for example, legacy communities being displaced? There's literature out there that shows that green infrastructure can attract higher property values, family households with higher annual income, et cetera. So all these things lead to gentrification. So how is it that TPL is addressing that?
Yeah. We did a study of our, we wanted to understand better what role, or if we were contributing to displacement. And for us, being able to do a rigorous study meant that we had to look in places where there was enough data to make it statistically significant for us. So the only place that we've been able to do a deep dive in this is in New York City, because we have transformed over 200 schoolyards through a joint use agreement. Schoolyards get redesigned with kids. They become kind of climate smart schoolyards, and then they are open to the public after school hours. And so we've only done that analysis for our projects in New York. We found that our projects did not significantly contribute to displacement. But I don't know that anybody at TPL is satisfied with knowing just kind of what our experiences has been in one place. So what we are doing today is to, when we know we're going to build a park, we try to pretty much have at the table, well, we're doing a couple things. Along the LA River, we're actually not building any parks along the LA River, but we are involved with a pretty large coalition of organizations, including LA Rise, La Raza. I have a report that I'm happy to share with folks afterwards, but we basically looked at the combination of park building and affordable housing. So the group of people who worked on this report produced a typology, a set of typologies of where parks and affordable housing could occur together. So forgive me, I'm not gonna remember all of the details, but it was basically like, if you have a parcel that is a certain size, you can dedicate some portion of that. There need to be a minimum size for affordable or market rate housing. You could look to purchase, you could look at 2 parcels that were adjacent, so one could be devoted to affordable housing. There were actually 5 typologies where you could look at a combination of park and affordable housing. And that really came from our experience in Bozeman, Montana. We built one of our largest parks, a 60-acre park called Story Mill Community Park. I think I saw Paige Byron on the line here. Paige Byron, for those of you who don't know, the infamous Paige in Jackson, Wyoming there. She also was instrumental in helping us fund and develop that park. But basically, there was an adjacent parcel that we purchased as well that's been dedicated for market rate housing. And so we've been thinking through that combination of trying to really invite the right combination of organizations to the table. So groups who are focused on affordable housing, a friendly for-profit developer who can help us think through kind of, whether or not some amount of that space could be dedicated to nonprofit groups or to local community-based organizations, to workforce development as well. So, kind of, can we bring together a constellation of organizations who are all trying to be very intentional about when the park is built, let's make sure that we have safeguards in place for housing, for jobs, for workforce development, so that we can get ahead and try to ensure that displacement does not occur. So we're aware that it happens, and we're trying to just get ahead of it. And I think in my view, it may not be enough to just say, oh, let's bring everybody to the table. We want to really try to put in place the right people who can say, yeah, we're here at the table to address housing. We're here to address workforce development. We're here to address, job creation. So that's what we're trying to do to address it.
And so I think, like, bringing people to the table, it's not as easy as it sounds. So, what's that process for bringing people together? And that, I think, segues into Madison Burns' question here, which I was also wondering, what forms of outreach does your organization use to invite the community into the planning process? Maybe you could just add on to that, just how do you get the people to the table? What does your outreach process look like?
Yeah, so we fan out and work with all the local community groups who themselves have their own networks. So we'll start to just reach out to as many people as we can who we know, we're flyering, we're going to farmers markets, we're going to schools, we're going to grocery stores, we're going to retail stores. And then we also reach out and meet local nonprofits who are also operating in that area, in the neighborhoods where we work, let them know what we're doing, invite them to also activate their network so that they can all be brought in to give us a sense for what's important to them. So it's a lot of good old-fashioned networking. It's really just getting out there and being present. And so getting the word out ourselves, and then activating other organizations who then talk to the people that they're interfacing with and bring them to the table. So it's online and it's in person, it's flyering, we're trying to be as opportunistic and cast a wide net as possible. In terms of, so I think that's probably exactly how it happens, actually.
Great. And so a question from an anonymous attendee. How do you see this increase in green spaces, which, the green spaces seems to be very anthropogenic, so it's very much anthropocentric. So it's very much centered around kind of human use. So how can these green spaces help with other crises that we face, for example, in global biodiversity that's being threatened more and more every day?
That's a great question. I wish I had an easy, nice answer for that, which was like, oh, you just do these 5 things and you're done. What we try to do is, one, if we're building a park, or we've done a lot of community open space plans and, visioning plans, and we often call them green prints. I think people call them by different names. They're typically like an open space plan. And what we do is ask the people who live there what's important to them. And we will also do our own kind of, our own research on that place, on that space, to understand, spatially and environmentally what's happening there. It is typically the case that there are stakeholders in the room who also who know about whether or not they're a rare or threatened species, or whether it's a habitat that that hosts that is a flyway, or that is habitat for many other species. If not, we try to come to the table with a lot of that information in hand, so that we can, if it is the case that nobody says that maybe we're in in an environment and people are trying to protect the open space because they're just trying to prevent, you know, housing development from coming through. There'll be a lot of voices that are talking about kind of preventing housing and that they want to boost, you know, outdoor recreation. People will say, well, I really love biking, and other people will say, well, I really, you know, I want to make sure there are walking trails. And so we'll hear what people communicate directly. And if we've done some research and we know that maybe it's a corridor, it's a migration corridor, for example, going through an area, we will raise that as well. So, you know, we know this about this place. What do you all think about that? So we try our best to kind of think about human use first, because for the Trust for Public Land, we're trying to get people access to nature as much as possible where they don't currently have access. But we also want to build stewardship of that place over time. And so any way that we can help create that sense of ownership, we try to do it. And sometimes it is by saying, hey, this is a very special place for these reasons. You know, maybe it is the drinking water source for these millions of people downstream. Maybe it's because it is a migration corridor for mule deer, or maybe it is because it, you know, it's a climate resilient site, in fact, and, you know, and so here are all the reasons why it is special. It's also special because it can provide you with outdoor recreation opportunities. And so here are all the reasons that we should really try to protect this place and protect it in a way where access can also be about enjoying it while protecting what it makes it so special.
Great, and just a follow-up from Paige about bringing in other stakeholders is that she notes that some pro tips are bringing in one or two key partners, listening a lot, and then also going to the places where communities congregate. So instead of asking them, oh, come here and talk to us here, you go to where they are and meet them on their ground. So another question from Mary Berman is, how are you working to ensure access to persons with disabilities?
Great question. We are, I guess we're trying our best to work with our park agency partners to make things ADA accessible. So I know there's the transportation example that I shared in LA County. We talked a lot about you know, the fact that if we're going to help introduce additional transit lines, that there needs to be also ADA accessibility at that trailhead. And so we're, you know, I think when we think about programming and access, we're trying to just think about access, not just for people who don't have it, but for people of all capabilities. So we're trying to find a lot of funding to redesign trailheads and trails for better access. And then and where we know that people are looking for more access for otherwise for ADA or other folks with other types of capabilities, or that we make that information available to the park agency who owns and maintains that parcel. So we try to just do our best, and when we know that there are communities out there who are thinking about making, you know, who need access differently, we try to bring that into the design as much as we can.
From Ashley Mokoro Powell, she notes that she mentors a lot of emerging young professionals of color that are at the nexus of environmental sustainability sectors and justice movements. What are ways that TPL is creating space at the institutional organizational level for these young professionals to be part of the processes that you share? She'd be interested in hearing about programs that you have developed or are partnering on, and what advice you'd give to a 17 to 26-year-old that might be interested in exploring this profession.
Well, so TPL, all of our offices have an advisory board, And what we're trying to do now with those boards is create like a committee of young professionals like yourself who are interested in just learning more about how to be advocates for parks and open space. So that's a lot of what we're trying to do, is just find those individuals who are interested in learning more about park building, land conservation, and then create the space for them to help to learn about our organization, learn about what's happening in, right where they live, and just giving them access and giving them a voice. Giving them access to learn about kind of how we think about the work that we do, and then giving them a voice to help us hear more from them, and basically, help us build that network. And so it just takes a handful of people to then sort of say, yeah, I've just became a committee member at my Trust for Public Land office in New Haven, Connecticut, and it's super fun. Hear all the things that we're doing, and you can join me at the next meeting. I guess any advice that I would give for somebody like you who's interested in this is find your local land trust. Wherever you are, there is a land trust nearby who is doing great work, who you just, set up an informational interview, learn more about them, find out if there is a board, find out if they have any kind of committees, like a volunteer committee that you can serve on. I would also reach out to your local Parks and Rec agency and ask them, they have days where they either have like public meetings. They're probably I know people are trying to find ways to meet differently, but there are some meetings that you can get involved with even virtually today to find out more about what they're working on, how to get involved. Find your local Trust for Public Land office and reach out. And if you can't find it online, send me an email, and I'll put you in touch with the closest person that I know. But there are park agencies all over the place, and you can even go to your local park and find out who, if there is a Friends of Park, and if there isn't one, get one started. It's amazing, and it's a fantastic, exciting thing to be part of, to be part of a local Friends of group, or even get one started. You will be amazed at how many people are like, yes, I've been looking for this as well. Nextdoor is also a great resource to see who's doing what around your local parks and land conservation. But those are some of the places I would start just to get involved.
Great. So thinking about and taking engagement online and what that looks like. One thing I'm wondering about is, I'm assuming this is, this is being pushed forward a lot because of our just current, our current context now, but, how that engagement reaches, how, I guess, diverse that reach is, and whether or not it can reach everybody, because I think there's early adopters and there's late adopters, and it's just not, just doesn't work for everybody. And that just may be the limitations of it. And also, and maybe you could also comment on, from Meredith Spetcher, she also asks, what are online platforms that you're looking at to continue engaging the community?
I knew I was going to get this question, and I was scrambling to send an email to my colleagues who are doing it. I don't have a list now, but I am happy to share one after this. It is happening in real time, people. I mean, the TPL offices that are building parks all over the place are like, we cannot get in front of people, so what will we do? So our internal website, where we're all chatting in our Slack channel, is like exploding with what people are finding and what people don't like and what they like. So yeah, I mean, in the chat function, if anybody's exploring stuff, I would love to know what people are looking at as well. But I'm also happy to share what we're finding. And we definitely haven't settled on anything, because this is very new for us. And so we know we have kind of a set of criteria, which I talked about, which we're looking for, but we have not landed anywhere, but I will share those with you for sure.
And do you have any tips about, just from my previous question, about how to, bring on late adopters? So people who maybe not be so tech savvy?
What we're looking, so we're making an assumption that I hope isn't dangerous, but we're going to see as time goes that most people have a smartphone at home. So even if they don't have a laptop or a computer, they probably have a phone. So for us, mobile is really important. As we all know, some websites are not optimized for mobile and some are. And so a lot of this is looking at apps that have been designed. And then the way that we're, and we're just trying to see what kind of usage we're getting, and we're trying to compare that to usage that we have seen in the past. It's definitely, we have some blind spots, because for some of our projects right now, we are maybe at the beginning of engagement. I know where I live in Oakland, California, we are working with Oakland Unified School District right now on, we have 4 schools that we're transforming the playgrounds, because they're like empty asphalt lots right now. And so we're transferring those, and those are just getting underway. And so we have a sense for, we know the size of the school population. The school district can kind of tell us about how many parents we're dealing with, so we have a sense for numbers. It starts to get a little bit murkier as we fan out, and we know that there are all these other local organizations that we're reaching out to as well. So we kind of rely on other people to tell us about what their numbers look like for engagement. And so, we're just trying to find the application that we like first, and then we're trying to get it into people's hands, and then we're going to sort of see what we can do to drive usage. We've been talking a lot about gamification, and if that's a way to do it. We talked to the folks at, there's a group called Niantic, and they're the group who developed the Pokemon Go game, which many of you may recall. Many of you may still be playing it. And for those of you who remember Pokemon Go, it got people out in droves like crazy. And so we're trying to think through, like, I don't know, is there some extension of that or some version of that that we can apply that will make it fun for people to give us feedback? So the jury is still out on whether or not we can find something like that, but we're trying.
Great, thanks so much, Linda. So if you want to stay connected, please do stay connected. We do have a Slack community, and there's the link there. I'm actually going to paste these links into the chat so you guys can have them. So in our Slack, so we're going to paste in some of these questions. I've been putting in links into our chat or into our Slack channel, particularly for this webinar. We have a channel called the Health and Nature webinar. So you can just follow up on some of these links. And if there's any links that Linda, you'd like to share, I can also just pop that in there as well. So you guys we can just continue this discussion through that channel. We also will have, all the webinars are going to be on Shift's YouTube channel. And also we put all the slide decks on Figshare so that they are citable. Oops, I didn't update this. Our next webinar is actually is going to be on April 14th, and we're going to be headed into the 2nd chapter on public health. So some Shift announcements. We have the Emerging Leaders Program is accepting applications, and you can contact Morgan for that. And you can also send us nominations for the Shift Awards, and you can contact Arian with that. And so with that, Linda, I'd really like to thank you for your participation and all of your questions, or answering all of the questions, and participants, for the attendees who are here. Thank you so much for your great questions. If you do have more questions, I think you can reach out to Linda directly. You can also post them into our Slack channel. Yes, thanks for joining us, and we hope to see you at the next one.
Great. Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.